Hi, welcome. My name is John Byrne Barry. I'm a member of the BEPA Board of Directors, and I'm going to be interviewing Janice Litvin, author of Banish Burnout Toolkit, and I'm going to let her do her own introduction. So Janice, why don't you tell me about yourself and your book?
Thank you so much, John. First of all, I want to thank you and the BEPA board for inviting me to be interviewed today. I have a long and varied background, but I'll try to keep it succinct. After 20 years as a technology recruiter, we had a recession, as you all remember, and I had to figure out what to do. So having become sedentary, I decided to go to the gym, get in shape, and there I found Zumba Fitness. From Zumba Fitness, after teaching a few years, I was trying to figure out a way to translate being a Zumba instructor to having an impact on the corporate world without just teaching Zumba. And so I went back to school to study the science of exercise, which included psychology. And that's the part that I connected with the most. And then I found the world of workplace wellness, which led to customers asking me to speak about stress and burnout. And from there, that led to the book.
So tell me about the book.
Well, thank you. Thank you for asking. So first of all, I want to say that every time I do a talk that involves stress and burnout, I'm so pleased by the impact it seems to have on the participants. I always ask them what their biggest takeaways are, and I love that they feel like they've gotten something out of it in terms of ways to change their life. For one tiny example, the first chapter, or what I call tool in the toolkit, is something called Stop and Audit, which means I teach people how to stop, take a breath, observe, and then proceed. And the goal of which is to help people learn to stop and pause before they react to a stressor.
So that's the first chapter of the book. What's the, I mean, that makes it sound so simple. Obviously, if it was that easy, no one would be burned out.
It does. I know it. You know, it's funny. The concepts are simple. It's applying them that makes it so hard. But yes, that was.
It's like meditation or something, you know, or some of the Zen Buddhist stuff. Like just pay attention and relax. Well, that's easier said than done, right?
Right. Right. So the next part is to understand what the typical stress characteristics are, which are overreaction, overgeneralization, and should statements. And once you understand and you can see yourself in an example like, he's always late for dinner. The service at that restaurant is always terrible. When you hear yourself saying the word always, you can then put a reality spin on it and say, is that really true? Is he always late for dinner? Or is it just you get so annoyed when he is late because the dinner gets burnt or the event gets ruined? And so it's really important to reality spin your thoughts. So we look at first the typical reactions, we reality spin them, and that's part of the behavior change. And then in tool number 3, it gets psychologically a little deeper, which is trying to tie your behavior in the current day to something you learned in the past, which could have been role modeling from parents, something teachers did or said, or a traumatic event.
So let me just use a personal example from my life, being married to someone who works really, really hard and feels like the work is never done. And I'm lazier and I say, hey, you just have to let things go. But if you really want to do the best possible job, and many people's jobs are like climbing mountains, you can't just let it go. How do you address that? That must be very common, right?
I think so. And based on my own experience, every time I reread the book, I mean, it was done. Then we had the edit process, which all of you know is a long, arduous process in and of itself. And then after the edit process, it was done. But then every single time I picked up the book and read over it, I kept finding things. I'm like, oh, this paragraph's out of place. Maybe we should rename this chapter. Maybe we should completely rework, not to mention all the editing errors. And that happened to me like 3 times. And each time I said, this is the last time. But I finally talked to my editor and I said, when am I done? And she said, you're done. So sometimes it's getting the reflection from other people.
Right, right. Well, the other way is that you could just, toward the end of the book, you could say, I know that this is not complete and I should really, really make it comprehensive, but I want to model this. So I'm just going to stop now.
Or you could say that that leaves room for the next book.
That's right. That's right. Yes. The Banish Burnout Toolkit for Pets or something like that.
Right.
So you must have learned a lot while writing it. What was the most surprising thing that you learned along the way?
Wow. That's a very interesting question. I learned, well, this is interesting. I learned that I need to take my own advice. And I learned that when I got frustrated or upset with some part of the writing process, that I needed to say to myself, that's okay. You don't have to get that upset. Look at the whole picture and look at what you're doing and try to keep the big picture perspective in mind. And then taking advice from only 2 or 3 people. I found that if I asked too many people for advice, I got too many votes and too much advice, and I didn't know which way to look. So I decided to limit it to just 2 or 3 people.
So you call this a toolkit. So my guess, there's probably some concrete practices that are involved in there. Can you talk about what 1 or 2 concrete practices that you encourage in the book?
Yes. So first of all, the reason I call it a toolkit is because it's a workbook. And so originally I was going to write 2 books, the Banish Burnout book and the Banish Burnout Toolkit. But I realized that it was too hard to separate. And if I put it all together in one book, it would be easier for me as a writer and easier for the reader. So I put all the knowledge and all the work inside the one book. So here's one concrete thing that people can do. When you're in a situation where someone is rude to you or someone upsets you for whatever reason, when you're in a meeting, say, you're not going to start screaming and yelling, hopefully. But if you pay attention to your body, you will notice that you are having a reaction. You might have knots in your stomach, elevated heart rate, sweaty palms, whatever. There are many common physiological reactions. And so I created something called a stress audit, so that as soon as possible after the event or the stressor, you go home or sit quietly and write out what happened, how did you react physically, how did you react verbally, emotionally, what exacerbating behavior did you exhibit, meaning how upset did you get and how long did you stay there? I used to be the person that complained and complained for days and got extremely upset when someone, what I thought, wronged me. But I learned over the years from reflections from other people that, hey, this situation's not that big a deal. You're really overreacting. And then you're staying upset for so long, you're only hurting yourself. You're not hurting other people. And then the 5th piece is, did you exhibit any addictive behavior? And I felt like this book is not about addiction, but that I couldn't leave it out. As a person who likes to overeat and understands how people use their addictions to assuage their anxiety, I thought it was important just to mention it.
Well, I'm sure that one of the symptoms of being burned out is drinking, for example.
Well, drinking is quite a complicated
Yeah.
addiction. And so people drink or eat or shop or stay in bed or whatever the addiction is for a variety of reasons. Too happy, too sad, too hungry, too lonely, too tired. And I really think that we all are looking for love. And some of us find it in a bottle or a gallon of vanilla ice cream.
Right. Well, one of the things I know that people are burned out these days is Zoom meetings.
Yeah. Yes.
Even though we're doing one right now. And
Yes.
I just wonder if there's obviously you wrote this book before the pandemic, but just if there's any wisdom in it for dealing with, the limitations that we have to deal with today that I mean, I know I'm a crossing guard, so the kids just went back to school in Mill Valley, and some of them, have been on Zoom since last March, and they're really tired of it.
Yes.
And I'm sure, they're on for more hours a day than I am, but there's plenty of people who are on many, many hours every day. And I just imagine it must be you just want to turn it off.
Yes. So just like with anything, it's important to modulate your own body and mind and emotions. And so like yesterday, I was in like my third of 4 Zoom meetings. Thankfully, one of them got canceled. I was so happy, but I found myself yawning. And I thought, okay, as soon as this is over, I'm stopping. And I stopped for the day and I decided, oh, wouldn't it be fun to go to the grocery store? Just anything to get up and get out. When you're tired like that, especially when you're sedentary, which Zoom meetings by definition are, it's important to get up. And I was in a Zoom meeting one time where a woman was on a treadmill and I'm like, what is that woman doing? Because you see her walking back and forth. And I was very actually proud of the fact that someone had the idea to stand up and walk and move. And she said, well, if I don't, my Apple Watch will beep at me if I don't keep moving every hour, so many steps. Right. But it's really important to modulate yourself. The other thing I would say is what I have found from the experience of the COVID is to try to find a silver lining in every situation. And so one benefit of the Zoom technology is being able to interact with family members outside of our geographic area.
Right. Before I ask you another question, if anybody in the audience has a question, you can put it in the chat, and we'll probably have time for 1 or 2 questions. So, what's next? This is probably something you've been percolating on for a long time, and now it's done. You just launched it like just this month or something, right?
About a month ago, yes.
Yeah. So other than the marketing and promotion and all that kind of stuff, what's next in terms of writing? Next in terms of if you are going to do some other.
Well, I do need a break from the writing. You're right, and I do love writing and marketing and interacting with people. And right now, I'm using the book for my classes that I lead, corporate classes in stress and burnout. And so everyone gets a copy of the book, which is wonderful. But I found while I was writing the book that the one hole in the book was how to help managers prevent burnout in their employees. And so the next book will be Banish Burnout for Managers.
Okay, that sounds good. I have a question here that from one of the people on the call here. From Marilyn Flowers, she says, my burnout is taking on too many projects. How do you learn to say no to good stuff? I think that's a pretty common question.
That is one of the tools in the book. I felt like people's ability or lack of ability to manage their schedule is part of stress and burnout. And I too always say yes and always like to take on a lot of projects. The only thing you can do is try to figure out that there's only so many hours in a day. Some people work 8 hours, 10 hours, whatever it is. You can only take on so many big projects in a day. And you have to figure that out for yourself. Is it one big project and a lot of little things? Or is it 3 big projects and you have to modulate for yourself, but you do have to live within your own limits.
Right. Well, I have been burned out in my life, but I am not, necessarily a burnout type character, but part of it is because I do set my own limits. And some people, I'm not going to mention any names, have referred to that as lazy. No, I'm just saying that there are times where the way you set limits is by stopping and not staying late and this and that. And anyway, one of my bosses once said, okay, I'm going to ask you to do this, but I only want you to spend an hour on it. Just do the best you can in an hour. And the fact is that sometimes when you're focused, you can actually get a lot done fast. It's not how many hours you put into it, it's the focus.
So. Right. Some people, I've given that a lot of thought, especially when you think about Silicon Valley, where overwork is the word of the day. And it can take one person 8 hours to do a job, and it can take another person 4 hours. So why are we judged by how many hours we stay at work? Isn't it more about what we can accomplish?
Well, it's harder to judge. It's harder to measure what you accomplish, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, like for building a house, I imagine that some builders can get it done in X number of months, and another kind of builder would be more picky, and it would take them longer. I don't know anything about building houses, but I'm saying that for whatever job it is, everybody takes a different amount of time.
So Janice, you probably have a copy of the book there. Someone asked if you can show us a sample of the inside pages, or just, or do you have like graphics on the inside, or
I do.
charts or anything like that, just so someone could get a sense of what it looks like.
Absolutely. I do have a lot of color, and I hope we can see this. This is a picture, oh my God, picture of the stress audit.
Stress audit. Hold it right in front of you.
And then the other picture that I'm proud of is the stop, take a breath, observe, and proceed.
Hold it right, hold it up a little bit. Stop. Okay, I see the stop. Okay. Okay.
So this visual helps people when they're in one of my workshops. They always remember stop, and I think it's partly because the visual is so big and bold.
Right, right. Well, you said you're also a Zumba instructor, and it sounds like your approach is very oriented toward the physical aspect of burnout as opposed to just the mental.
Well, it's both really. And one thing that I do tell people is when you're feeling really, really stressed. In fact, I was in a workshop this morning. When you're really feeling, one woman talked about her depression, and she felt like she had clinical depression. And I said, whether you have clinical depression or you just have days where you feel depressed or low or blue, getting outside, the physical act of being outside has physiological benefits. And then the movement gets the blood pumping and the blood rushing. And there's a lot of science to support the idea that all that movement and being outdoors helps your clarity and your mood and the happiness chemicals. And so movement is part of it, definitely.
Okay, well, we're going to wrap up now. So here's the softball question for you. How do readers find out more about you and your book?
Thank you for asking that question. So my website is janicelitvin.com. I think you can see the spelling right here. But if you can't,
Litvin.
Litvin, lit the light, vin like vino, JaniceLitvin.com. And the book is JaniceLitvin.com/book.
Okay, well, thanks very much. And hopefully there are some people who are burned out who are not so burned out that they can't go and get a copy of your book.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, thanks. Bye.